Welcome back, everybody. The goal of these podcasts is just to mine tools and ways to help your mental health without without having to drop thousands of dollars on therapy if you don't have access to that. So here's another way to do that. And I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, it's a way to quench my own curiosity and help myself in the process and have different perspectives, because perspective change can be huge. So this week we had another conversation with Samantha Livingstone, Olympic gold medalist. She's a public speaker. She created this course that helps people with their mental health, that programs can use, that individuals can use, that schools and teams can use. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation again. I wanted to know why she created it, what's included in it, and how she is using it to change not just the conversation on mental health, but people's mental health. So besides that, we also talked about the difference between being in a flow state and when you have the awareness to being in a flow state. Does it take you out of a flow state, even though awareness is really... There's just a lot of conversations. There's a lot of good questions and conversations that we've had in this. And I can't wait to share it with you. So without further ado, I hope there's something in here that helps you in your mental health. Let's get rolling. Confucius said we have two lives, and the second begins when we realize that we only have one. We're all given one whole life. And when we find and break the barriers that are preventing us from living fully, we have an audacious attempt to improve mental health. One Whole Life with Sean Francis.
There's a woman that I follow who speaks like our language, but in parenting. Yeah. It's so funny how I can speak, teach, live, breathe, like this work in this athletic arena. And then when it comes to like home and parenting, I'm like, oh yeah, like, oh yeah, these things apply here too. So yeah.
Have you run into that? I mean, we'll just start this thing. I mean, we already started, but it's fascinating. But have you run into that where it's, you've just kind of realized with all the work and experimenting and research that it all just overlaps on top of everything? Have you gotten to that point?
Yeah, like because the foundation, the chorus remains, right? Yeah. Totally. Yes. Sometimes it's hard to bring it into a new arena though. So like, or if it's really close to home, I think like so up close, maybe I'm realizing as I'm saying this to you, like that role of mom is like, so is just a little too close versus having it be something that like a role that I have in my life that feels sometimes like who I am. Yeah. So the woman that I'm referencing, she talks about two fists, because we've talked about like the person and honoring the person and then what they do in the world. So like Sean, right? And then it's like, this is who you are at your core and you're good inside and you're enough and you're worthy. And this is how you show up, right? So your actions. So like in sport, right? Above the line behavior or successes, and then below the line, or like even as a human being. So like husband, right? Friend, sometimes we misstep when we're below the line. And so what do you notice about this one?
Right.
It stays the same, right? Yeah. It's constant and it never changes. And these things, and so this space, so this modeling of the two fists has given like this visual and this kinesthetic to talking about like who you are from what you do. And it's so powerful. So as you were asking that question, I'm like, oh, I think like motherhood sometimes is here for me. Like, yeah, sometimes it creeps right here. Yeah.
So for you, it's just the way you look at it is it's just compartmentalizing, like being able to separate like who you are as a core and then who you are, the developmental side, the part that evolves and grows and so this, I see it as like this, our like soul essence inside this physical body, this human body, and that we inherently are good, like that we're worthy, that we are enough as we are, and we're worthy of love and belonging. We don't have to earn those things, right? We don't have to hustle to prove. We don't have to prove it, even though when we're young, like that's how when our brain is developing, we're looking for the messages, like we're trying to make sense of the world and connections. Right. And I've gotten really deep into, since the last time we talked attachment theory, how that the role that plays in the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are in the world and what the world expects from us. And so that core essence of who we are and then our actions. So it separates the human from the behavior. And so there's agency and control over
how we can show up in the world. And sometimes things happen to us that we can't control, but our response, right, is that separation, it's our actions. And so I feel like it helps us feel more empowered and in control, right? And takes ownership of the things that we can control in our life. So does that make more sense? So this is us as a human, right? And then this is how we're showing up in the world.
Yeah. No, I mean, now you're speaking my language, because this is like where I kind of started, which was going, well, what are we at our core? So I read this book called The Power of Now. I don't know if you've ever read that.
Yes, totally.
And then like that one's, I like that one, but his second one is better in my opinion. I think I forgot what it's called, but he essentially talks about how we don't need to develop more. We need to cut out what isn't working and get back to what we originally were, and then have a perspective as an adult, being like a little kid again, essentially going back.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. Yes.
And I do that. So when I meditate every morning, that's essentially what I'm trying to do, is just cut out all the garbage and crap and kind of see what the core is. Because I don't know if you do this, but do you think back to like when you were a kid and go, oh, I feel like I'm that exact same person when I was a kid. Like that part of me is still there. And that's where I go, oh, that's probably the true core of who I am. And then when you're here, you're going, but I reacted to the world way differently back then. And so why is it different now? And is there things that I can unlearn or take apart and get rid of that can get me back to that place? And so do you do a lot of that, like looking in?
Totally. That's it. So this morning I was reconnecting, and in my meditation went to this place of play. Like what did play, like where was I the most free as a child? And I think sometimes we can be afraid to go back there. Because like, what does that have to do with? But it's exactly like the core essence of me. So then now knowing, like having done this work, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in the water. Like these memories that are popping up, I'm swimming and I'm outside and adventuring. And one of the prompts was like, what books did you love reading? And I love Choose Your Own Adventure, like choose your ending. Like, do you know those books? Like where there's not a right way, you get to choose, right? So totally. And I love how beautifully you said the unlearning, right? Because we pick up all these messages. So I really, truly believe we're born with an inherent magic. Like that's unique to us and part of our journey. And that does get maybe dampened down by our experiences in the physical world and things that happen to us and the lack of maybe support and processing what's happening to us along the way. And so we pick up all those messages that then as adults we can unlearn, because now we can create sense of safety in this moment, right? In our reality, so that we're safe to tap into that play and magic and creativity. Yeah, totally. We are on such similar journeys.
Yeah, for sure.
It's cool. Yeah.
I know. That's why I'm jacked. You decided to talk to me again. It's just pretty fun. But this kind of leads into one of my big questions, is because I've been asking a lot of when I do these podcasts, and nobody really has a straight answer. But I just wanted to see if you had something similar. Like, what does a mentally healthy person look like to you? Like, I know being athletes, both of ourselves are like, here's the goal, here's the standard, here's the time, here's the mark, here's the medal, here's whatever it is. Like, where are you trying to help people get to, or where are you trying to help yourself get to? Or is it different where you're like, there's no place to get to, I'm just trying to be okay with where I am?
Totally. There's no arriving, right? And I think that's one of the misconceptions to come back to. And so to give full credit, the two fist idea is Dr. Becky Kennedy. She has a whole platform. And this idea of like, when we in sport think like, oh, if I just get there, right? Like we think we're going to somehow have it, like it's going to be this fulfilling experience that then protects us from pain. At least that's what I thought, or like gives us that inner peace, that thing we're seeking as a human being that can't ever be found external, right? So, I mean, it's fun to hit goals, right? It's fun to knock those out. It's fun to challenge ourselves. And when we come from that place, I think that's a place we get a little misguided, is that a lot of athletes move through the world with the two fists together. And so when they fall short, it's devastating because they fall below. It feels good for a minute when you're here, right? But this kind of core concept. So with that said, I think that a mentally healthy person is one who's an expert, or it's a constant journey of becoming an expert on themselves. Okay. And so doesn't mean they're not going to hit speed bumps, roadblocks. It doesn't mean they're not going to fall below the line and act in ways that they don't necessarily want to show up in the world. And it sure as heck doesn't mean they're going to be protected from automatic negative thoughts and the full range of emotions. And so someone who, in my mind, what we're striving for when we talk about mentally healthy is able to recognize, so has a level of awareness. They're able to recognize what's happening internally and has a curiosity about what's happening versus that judgment that we can meet ourselves with, and then knows themselves or is learning and open to learning what works for them to help them regulate this nervous system that we have, right?
Yeah.
And come back to that regulated state so that we can engage in the world in a way that's authentic to us and not just how we think we should. So yeah, it's just a process.
So do you see this? I'm stealing a page from Viktor Frankl, but do you see that it's a reaction that becomes kind of the issue without the awareness piece, and that's where a lot of the issues and problems start taking place for not just athletes but just everybody when
humans, they're
on automatic instead of responding? I guess
we speak such the same language. Yeah. Did I share with you last time that book was the first book that was assigned to me when I was in the darkest place? The Viktor Frankl,
I was
Man's Search for Meaning.
It's amazing. I read it every year actually because it brings me back to a good place, where you go, oh man, this guy had the awareness to for people who don't know, Viktor Frankl was in the concentration camps, right? But he was a therapist, a Jewish therapist before he went in there, and so the whole time he's like watching subjects almost like an experiment,
and himself, right? His awareness
like a case study.
Totally, like the internal world. I think that even that awareness that we even have, like that was my introduction to it, because I always thought like this running narrator was just me.
Yeah,
I didn't understand that there was this core essence of me, and then the thoughts that I was thinking and the emotions that I was experiencing. So another really great book, Untethered Soul. Have you read that one?
Yeah. Someone recommended that one too.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
So good. So same kind of concept of understanding this awareness. So back to your question, yes, I absolutely. I think that because when we're in that space of reacting, we're reacting from subconscious. Like we're reacting from these places of pain and that kind of control and agency in our lives that allows us to really be present. I think when we're in that autopilot, we're not. I mean, where are we? I don't know, mental time traveling somewhere, right?
Right.
So when we are present and engaged, like that's where you can touch joy and just the experience of like living and what it means to be alive. So yes, and I don't know about yourself, like it's hard to create that space between, it takes a lot of willingness to fall and repair back, right? Like circle back and see like, what could I do differently here to set myself up, right? So that I'm not stepping on these little mines. What can I do? What's helpful? Like, where can I channel this energy if I do happen to step on one or something activates me? So that's what my trauma, like the most recent trauma with my daughter's heart surgery, which was almost 9 years ago, taught me.
Yeah.
Because I like having to live in that state, that post-traumatic state was so like, that as hard as I tried, I could not control when the triggers came as much as I wanted to, And so learning like, okay, when this happens, how can we create space to notice, even if it's just a moment to pause? Yeah. So I think one of the most powerful tools and skills out there is the power of pause. I think it's so simple just to stop, right? And it's hard. So
I mean, there's two things I want to ask you. The first one is, do you think you had some of those traumatic responses before that experience itself, like that aided into that, versus if you think you had the awareness prior, that whole experience might have not been as traumatizing for you? I mean, it's a horrible thing that happened, but could it have been a little less than, do you think?
Totally. Yeah, because I think about my experience and what I unpacked and then what I've learned since about trauma. And when I start to list, and I think ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, is important and part of the conversation, and it's limited, in my opinion. It doesn't capture a lot of other things that can be considered trauma. And so when I look back, like, yes, there was a lot of trauma, complex trauma in my childhood that absolutely 100% contributed to that moment being as like earth shattering, truly like cracking open. I don't even have words to capture like the level of breaking open that it was for me, and where it landed me. So, and I'm grateful for it, which is kind of weird to say. And it just is. It's one of those both and things, because we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard people explain it like you got to break something to rebuild it, sort of a thing. Yeah. And that's how I felt when I, had 2 traumatic mental health breaks where you go, oh man, the first one I don't feel like held very well. It was just like a crack in the armor. And the second one was like complete obliteration. And then putting the pieces back together, you got to go, oh, this piece isn't that helpful. Throw that away.
Totally.
Let's rebuild this in a better way. And there's part of me that's like, especially with meditating every morning, I'm going, do I want to be the solid piece, or do I kind of want to be this loosey-goosey, flowy, kind of pull pieces in as needed, because life feels like that and feels very fluid and constantly growing at the same time.
I don't want to be a rigid cup anymore. No more rigidity. Yeah. So healthy. So that's another area, like healthy boundaries. You're bringing up for me like healthy boundaries, because that's such a big part of this healing process for me. So not rigid and not porous. What's that? So everything in this whole journey is like, it's this both and, it's the space between, which allows for that flexibility and that adaptability. I think that is so beautiful. And I also think that goes back to that question of what, like, a mentally healthy person is someone who can dance in that space, who sure at times maybe touches rigid or porous and finds their way back to that space of, is aware enough to know, oh yeah, right, I'm not where I want to be. So
that awareness piece seems hard for people, like especially if they've never experienced it before. I don't. Maybe you can speak on this, but I've had better luck with athletes than I have just regular people, because they can at least bring awareness to movements or patterns or something like that. And you go, hey, just take that focus and move it to what your thoughts are doing or how you're feeling, and then they can go, oh, I've never. They'll at least try it,
Yeah.
And
because I think that athletes, because we're moving our physical bodies through the world and we're so used to taking cues and paying attention to where our body is in physical space, there's this like higher level awareness already. That's part of, either it's honed and or we're drawn to the sport, or kind of a combination of both. Totally. Yeah, I would say. So I don't know. I think there's variation too within populations. So it's hard for me to say, but in like the general population, I guess most of my work is inside the athletic arena, some outside of it, but I think there's even variation, because in the general population, you still have athletes, former athletes, right?
Yeah.
Or people who've like given birth, right? And you like nothing like being called into your body for that process, right? So, so that, I think you're onto something though with that is the first critical step, is how do we help people even become aware?
Right.
Before diving into then all the tools of like, how do you challenge the inner critic and all these things? It's like, pause, like, you have an inner narrator.
Yeah.
What's that sounding like? And so there are really cool exercises that I use. I don't know if you do any of this to bring, like with ice and this crackers or candy, or even like wall squats or planks and things that help people to move them into a space where you can guide them through gentle questioning while they're doing the experience, to then introduce them to that space of like, hey, got this talk going on. What's it sound like?
Right. I love that. So can you break this down a little bit? So I haven't done it with crackers or candy or whatever.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Is this part of when you? Is it? I know the name's kind of long, so I don't want to butcher it. But this.
Oh, the Mindful Sport Performance. Oh, the academy you're talking about?
The academy, and then you also have been going to schools and talking in front of people. Are these the types of things you
so it depends. Yes, and it depends on what I'm being called to do.
Okay.
So it ranges from like, if it's mental health advocacy and storytelling, then I'll share my story. And even I would say, even in sharing stories, even listening to podcasts, like when we're listening, we're going like, oh, maybe, like we start to hear these concepts and then pay attention differently in our lives. And that's really what mindfulness is about, right? Paying attention with curiosity in this moment. So when I'm working with a team or running a workshop, then I will often, like, I go back to my teaching, like engaging activity at the opening, right? And so that might be an opening activity where we're doing wall sits, or the candy one. That's fun because, of course, right?
Yeah, candy.
Like candy. Although that one's interesting in the sporting arena because that can also bring, you want to make sure you're doing the best that we can to like honor where people are at and not be activating other things.
Right.
So it's impossible to prevent all of that, right? But engaging in, so it's mindful eating, but you're just using with candy. And then I use the Mindful Sport Performance Enhancement it's an awesome book that anyone can buy, actually.
Yeah, I actually got it. You told me.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to dive into it?
I haven't. If you could see my library of books, it's
totally
a little thing. I bet yours looks the same way.
Totally.
It's on the list.
And I will not. No, we won't. We can purge and declutter everything in this house except the books. Don't touch the book. So they have guided scripts in there, and then you learn as you go, right? As you do these, and you kind of guiding people through the experience of like activating their senses. So let's say the candy. So the candy is, first it's in its wrapper, and then there's this unwrapping. And so you're moving way slower than people would. I mean, when we eat candy, we're like ripping the wrapper off, popping it in, and barely tasting it for most of us, right? And so slowing it down to really intentional movements, and then like interjecting, like notice where your thoughts are going. Like you might be wondering why I'm taking so long. I'm feeling irritated. And I did an activity recently with wall sits, and when we were debriefing, because this is the part that's important, right? So you do the activity, moving them through with questions, and then the debrief is where the magic, like that's where it's gold. Like you just step back, kind of get out of the way and ask the questions to facilitate the conversation. One of the athletes was like, I felt such irritation toward you. Like I was really annoyed by because they were in physical pain, right? Like, why am I doing this? And then you had others who were like, I know we have a hard workout tomorrow, so like I was just not interested. But I'm like, and again, the point of mindfulness is to bring you to a space of conscious choice. So that's beautiful too, because I wasn't saying you want people to get to that place where they're making the decision to engage in the ways they want. And then you can, playing with pain. So there's one with ice. And so that one's really, when we talk about that reaction, like Viktor Frankl's experiences and what he talks about, it's like the impulses come, like ice goes flying, hands drop, like it's just kind of, you can see me smiling. I don't know if people listening to the podcast can hear it, but it's like bringing in a playfulness, because I think oftentimes we think of mindfulness as someone sitting like cross-legged on the mat, and that's kind of off-putting for many people because it's scary and unknown and maybe not comfortable. And so in these activities where they're experiencing, and we can make it playful and not like so rigid, it can open up such space for introspection. Yeah, it's cool. So I love that's a big part of when I'm planning activities with groups. So in a keynote setting or like a large group space, there are activities that I'll interject, but not in that way. It's more of like doing that with groups where you can facilitate good conversation.
I love that. I've started my last few talks with, it's similar. I wish now I'm going to bring candy to all of them, but I have everyone imagine a lemon, and then I just describe what it smells like, sour, what it tastes like on their tongue, how they can peel it apart. You break it. It's the same kind of idea. You just
as my mouth waters.
Exactly.
Our brain.
And that was the idea, I asked everyone, did you get the feeling in your jaw? Does your mouth water? And then I go like, that's how powerful thoughts are. There's no lemon in front of you, but this is why it's important to bring awareness to thoughts. And then I go into like the presentation after that, but
that's cool.
Yeah. Most people that usually kicks it like, oh my God, why is this happening? What am I thinking? Yes. And they go, what am I thinking about? Just like you said, it brings that awareness piece, which seems really powerful.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Because you're priming them, and then you're making it important and relevant to them to listen to. Like, why should I care about this? You're like, because your mouth just watered and your jaw,
mouth just
like,
watered,
tightened.
And now you can see them all drinking water afterwards. Like, I'll get this out of my mouth.
That's so funny.
And I probably shouldn't do this one. I've been wrestling with this, but at the last one I tried it and got a few chuckles. But my wife would like. We're pretty jokey. She would fake hit me in the ball sometimes. It's like, kind of, and you would go, she's like, I didn't even hit you. It didn't even hurt. I'm like, it did hurt. My brain made it hurt. And when I would say that to the guys in the last class, they're like, oh yeah, we can think about that. And we're going to get a stomach ache for sure. Like our thoughts are powerful.
That's so funny.
But yeah.
Well, and also visceral, like, or vicarious learning, like witnessing, those mirror neurons are going like, what?
Yeah, like, no. Yeah. Or have you ever seen those old shows on MTV where people are breaking their legs or something? You're like, oh my leg starts hurting.
It's like Funniest Home Videos, same thing. Where people crash and you're like, so I can't remember I don't remember who the study was by. I remember teaching it though when I was in the classroom, and there's a video of like, so talking about mirror neurons, are you familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like a guy carrying a box down the street, and you're sharing that with the class, and you see the whole class like trying to go to help the guy like hold the boxes. So it's so powerful. Yeah.
That's interesting because pole vault coaches get that a lot. You see them. We call it the coach's lean.
Oh,
so if someone's going over, they go to try and help their athlete get over the bar. Yeah, it happens all the time. I never put that together. That's just more neurons.
So funny.
But yeah, it's a coach's lean. Just. They feel like they can help them get over.
That'd be a funny video.
Yeah, for sure. I got to write that one down.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Make sure you tag me in that one.
Yeah.
I love it.
So here's another question. Do you think? So I was asked to ordain a wedding, my brother's wedding. And that was a whole trip in and of itself because you go. Personally, I don't really like the idea of marriage, like government being tied into things, but I love the idea of the commitment. So I have this like weird battle with it. Yeah. And then I was asked to marry them, right? So then I'm like, oh man, I'm in this really weird position, but they asked me to do it for a reason. So, so for about 6 weeks, I like rewrote the speech 14 times. It felt like, throw it away, start over. But it made me really think about, like love, like at this point, right? And what it really is. And then my brother said one of the something that just kind of poked my brain in a good way, but he goes, I don't like thinking about love because if I have to try and describe it, it takes away from the experience in and of itself. I just like to sit in it and have it.
Yeah.
And then he goes, I like to do that with everything, whether it's play or all these other things. And then it kind of messed with me a while because I go, if you bring awareness to this play part, can it take away from the experience in of itself? And have you noticed that at all? Or do you find it
so cool? I love diving in this space with you. So where my mind went was like a state of being, and it's kind of like flow, like when we're completely immersed in the present moment, we're not thinking about the present moment.
Right.
So there isn't. So what that sounds like what he's describing. So the awareness and the regulation, like, are the skills, like those, that's a prerequisite to then tap into and dance in these spaces. Cause I don't know how long I don't know if anyone's ever done a measurement of that or how you would even capture that, but like how long we can stay in those spaces of pure presence. That's what it feels like. Yeah. So then we dance out right in the awareness as that kind of moving in more to our thinking brain. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So I'm with him in that. Because when you start to think about what you're thinking about, almost like moving into this meta state of like when we're thinking about what we're doing, we're now in our thoughts and not totally immersed in that present moment experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're up here, not in our bodies. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just kind of fascinating because I've been throughout all these podcasts and research, it seems like step one's always awareness. So it was like, how do you get people to be aware? 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 And then he kind of flipped that on and said, when I am aware, I'm not in it. And I go, oh man. So it's like, how can you differentiate when you're in a flow state versus when you're in this software program, that we've kind of developed over time, and how can you turn the awareness off enough to be in the flow, but then you're vulnerable to maybe be sucked back into that other space.
What's the other space?
Well, I guess like reacting to trauma, in an unhealthy way or something that's painful. And the only way I've gotten to this a little bit is to go, if it's causing a massive amount of pain, to me, that's like a fire alarm to pay attention.
Yeah.
So if you can check in every once in a while without hopefully letting the line of flow go away.
Well, I think our minds will wander. They will. Something will pull our attention at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like fascinating to me. I love neuroscience. So I don't know if it's even yet to be explored in is it the Huberman lab? Andrew?
Yeah, Huberman. Yeah.
It sounds like a question he would totally be exploring, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. In his lab. Yeah, I don't know if I haven't, I don't know what that it's a fascinating thing to think about. I think that kind of cultivating the skills, the awareness is so critical to know, like, it's a prerequisite. So having that awareness, the attentional awareness and regulation, and then emotional awareness and regulation is a prerequisite to access and enter flow state, right? So we need to have those skills in order to access the space. And then I say it's like place of play and dance. And so when we're in that space, how I like internalize it is we're fully in our bodies.
Yeah.
So like we're in harmony. Like there's this mind body connection, and we got our prefrontal cortex and our limbic system. Like we're all online, right, and able to access this thing that we're doing. So when our attention gets pulled, we step out of that space. And so having the awareness and the regulation to be able to re-anchor back in, that's like a doorway that allows us to re-enter flow. Yeah. And I don't know how long we can stay. And I don't know that flow then moves into that place. That's a really cool question of like, does flow, like when you're in that space, can that then send you into a place of, that autopilot in a way?
Can you autopilot flow?
I don't know.
That'd be great.
Well,
I mean, that's kind of what flow is, right?
Well, oh my gosh, I could pull my book out. We had this really beautiful discussion when I did my training around this. And so autopilot is part of flow. So there's this rub between this mindfulness curriculum and then the 9 elements of flow state. And so we were just kind of rumbling in that space of how you tap into it. And then Magnus, do you follow Steve Magnus's work?
Yep.
Around, his book, it's fantastic, just around how we can have high level performance and actually be fully feeling and have it be a painful experience, but we're still able to tap into that really high performance, or at least extraordinary performances that we didn't think we were capable of. So I don't know. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know either.
I love that. I love asking questions like this. So this is what gets me fired up.
Yeah, me too. Actually, the flow state was one of those first things I started exploring too. Because have you read this book called? I think it's called Stealing Fire.
No,
it's really good. That's one I always revert back to. They study flow in Arizona. They have this whole facility where all they do is study flow states, and they've done things with Navy SEALs where they can get flow between 4 people. They call it group think or group flow, kind of an idea. Mm-hmm. And you probably know all about this with athletes and stuff too. Yeah. But they would kick certain SEALs out who weren't good for the group, even if they were stronger, faster, better shots and all these other things, because the group was stronger than everything else. And they talked about ways how to get into flow state. Whether it was exercise or meditation or group things, or they even brought in psychedelics and talked about how that can help with neuroplasticity and things like that. But it's fascinating. So you'll like that book.
I'm going to totally buy that as soon as we go.
It's good. I like that one a lot, actually.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, it is fascinating, and it's so fun. It's fun to play in that space and think about. So the word comes to me is alignment in that just right space of the challenge being right, and that efficacy of knowing we can do this thing and it's just right there, right out of reach. So I think that's what lights me up. And we're coming back to that authentic, younger child playing. It was what stories I read and what I was dreaming about in my spare time, comes back to that of constantly pushing the edge, trying to understand things, to then be able to teach it. It's cool. Yeah.
So what you were thinking about as a kid, you don't have to share if you don't want to. Are you doing a lot of that same stuff now that you were able to get rid of some of these barriers that maybe were preventing that for a long time.
Like that was I'll probably start to tear up. Like I feel really grateful. Like I am, I mean, especially over the past few years with all the curveballs that we've gone through collectively, because it was 2016. I can't remember if I shared that moment with you last time when I went during the Rio Games when I opened my bins. Did I talk about that story with you?
You did what?
What did I share that story with you? I don't want to repeat what I've already shared when the Rio Olympics were on and my daughters wanted me to pull out the bins from my Olympic stuff.
I haven't shared this one.
That was buried. So 16 years. So, I accomplished a lot as an athlete, and before this breaking open, right, with my daughter's heart surgery and that trauma and healing from it. But it wasn't just that, like you mentioned, it was a lot of trauma, a lot of layers in my childhood. And so that kind of experience got shoved in boxes, truly. And I presented with the world, or to the world, in a way that I thought the world wanted to see an Olympic gold medalist. Like I kind of conjured up this idea of who I was supposed to be and what was tolerable and what was not, about like talking about my experience, chopping off all the things that were really hard.
Yeah.
Right. Not the things that our culture loves, like the gritty stuff of the weight room work and that stage. But when it came to mental health challenges and navigating those darker spaces and my relationship with myself and food, that stayed in that bin. Yeah. Bins, all of them. So it was like all my medals, all the stuff that I dreamt about when I was a little kid, being able to experience. And when we were watching Rio, my kids were old enough, so I have 4 daughters. My kids were old enough, 3 older ones, to realize like, wait, you know them? Wait, you did that? Hold on, like that tattoo you have on you, is that, like they were just connecting all these dots. And I was newly postpartum with my youngest. And of course, like there's a lot of hormones flowing through, and just this experience of having 4 daughters and witnessing them unpack my stuff, because they went down the basement and they're like, okay, well, I don't know why you don't have this stuff out. Like, we're going to put on all your gear. And then I'm like, oh, wow, our gear is so like 2000. It's like, so like, no. But they had fun with it, putting it all on. And it was in that moment that I found my journals, my log books from my like 16, 17, 18-year-old self, 19-year-old self. And when I opened them, it was like, you ever have those moments where it just like, you just feel alone, like the entire world around you freezes. And it's like, just this tunnel of like being with what was in front of me. And I could not believe, like, it was with compassion that I did not have during the healing process of moving into recovery from an eating disorder, and like putting the pieces together and all of that from my younger self. So there was this mother now with having healed or healing from this really traumatic experience, learning how to talk to myself with kindness, learning, like starting to see how the trauma of that young girl played into my role as an athlete, and reading those words just like rocked me. And I went, oh my gosh, like that was when I decided to come back into athletics, because I was doing entrepreneurship work and serving women. And that lights me up in a way that I love it. And also I couldn't ignore what the pulls just became overwhelming. I'm like, looking at my kids, I'm like, what happens? Like, how does this happen? How does one talk to oneself this way, in depriving of food? And the language that was captured on the paper was the language of my inner critic, which is wild to see and also really painful. Yeah. So that moment for me was like, okay, like I'm going to figure this out. Like, that's where that question that when I present, it's always part of it, part of my presentations and conversations, is that question I rumbled with was, can we cultivate greatness and be healthy? Like, can we do both? And at first, even in that moment, I was like, I don't know, because I was watching Rio and watching former teammates and people I swam with make really bad decisions. And I'm like, as human beings, even though they're doing well in the water, and you're like, can we do both? I don't know. Or do you have to like just sacrifice your human self to be great? So that's what led me. So the questions you're throwing out, these questions energize me in a way that I don't know. I'm such a learner. Like, I want to know, I want to understand. I'm so driven by curiosity. And so that led me deep into, like, thankfully my husband's in academics and he works at Williams College. So I'm like, I need a library card. So I have access to all these awesome journals. I spent hours, years of time in that library, researching, reading, sifting through, trying to piece things together. And so then that serves as a foundation for what I teach now, in pulling out and identifying, like, what are those evidence supported practices that help us not only as athletes achieve an access flow state and tap into that, but also help us as human beings, like when it comes to protective factors with our mental well-being or healing from trauma. And so when you ask that question, am I doing like that young kid, what she was doing? I played school constantly. And I was like reading textbooks because a neighbor had she was an administrator in the school and happened to have this like box of like teacher edition textbooks. Like, this was my biggest joy as a kid. It was like learning and reading and then teaching with my little chalkboard. And then being able to like witness greatness and just get curious about, like, how are they? So all of it. And then adventure, of course, and the choose your own ending. That's so a part of my authentic self that was buried right when I was trying to like
gold medal.
Here's how I'm supposed to be. Here's how I'm supposed to look, act, talk, all of it. And now I'm like, I can pivot. And actually, if I don't pivot, then I'm like, I start to get really frustrated and I feel weighed down and boxed in, and I'm not made for boxes. So I think I also was admired when I was younger, disruptors. So like probably way before your time, but Punky Brewster.
And I didn't watch it a lot, but I know what it is.
But she was like, I loved her. Like, she just like be outside the box, disrupting the system. So always drawn to that. And then my favorite movie when I was younger was Cutting Edge and Top Gun. Like, these two. Have you ever seen Cutting Edge?
I don't think I have.
Okay. It's like probably on VHS. I don't know if these movies make it to digital.
I'm a movie dork, so.
So it's two figure skaters and a pair.
Oh, I've seen that. Toe pick, right?
Toe pick. Yeah. Totally. And the fact they were going for the Olympics, like that they were athletes, that they were competing and like pushing each, like all of it, like that, and then Top Gun, right? Like just like pushing the edge has always been a part. And I think I have to, like, this conversation is actually so beautifully refreshing for me, because being in a world that wants you to fit in a box, right, is hard. It kind of, you get a little beat up from it. And so reminding myself of like, nope, it's okay to be a disruptor and not fit in a box. And actually that's where I thrive. And that's where I find my flow.
Yes, same. I have a similar story where it wasn't Punky Brewster, but I fell into that punk rock phase where like the music, it was, like you grow up listening to your parents' music and you think, that's music I like. And then you find something else finally. And then you go, oh, I really hated their music the whole time. Like that was my experience. Then I found like punk rock. It started with like pop punk, and then it went all down to like The Clash and NoFX and all these like really pop punk bands that were just pushing against society or the way things were. Not even society, just like question this, question that, question this, question that. Question this. And so then I really resonated with that, because that's who I like as a kid. I was somebody who just wanted to see if I could. I guess that's the best way to put it.
I love that.
Can I do that? Can I see if I can do that? Can I see if I can do that? Can I see if I can do this? And my dad, I took all the home videos we had a few years on VHS and put them on a flash drive. And so I got to go through 85 through, and I was going, oh my God, there's my brother riding like a little 4-wheeler or something, and he's still riding 4-wheelers and snow. He's like a machine guy. And here's me going down a slide head first and then backwards and upside down and backwards and then trying to spin and then trying to jump off the slide. I just want to see how many different ways I could experience it,
Oh my
God. I still do that. And so as you're saying, I need to pivot all the time. I wrestle with that a lot, because I go, what we're told, and I don't know if you're told this too, but it's consistency and staying on the same path, and consistency and consistency and consistency and consistency. And I get so sick of consistency that I want to try something completely different, and so, this is refreshing for me too, finding somebody else who's, because I don't know if there's a lot of us or if we don't talk very much.
There's probably, I think, so learning this is another like portal to explore is human design. Have you just
for sure
played the nuts? Have you?
Yeah.
Do you know what's your energy type? Or because it's human design around like human design and thinking and planning. And so human design, people that are not, a lot of people, I would say general pop would say like, that's woo woo shit. Like that's not for me.
Not for me either. I need data and science and
not for you.
Yeah.
So it's not woo. It's like astrology combined. It's really cool. So that I feel like has been a massive permission slip for me to go, oh my gosh, like manifesting generator is the language for the listeners that are familiar. And that's my energy type. And it's like, so I have a card. I'll show it to you because when I did my like little reading, it's like
cool.
All the things, right? That remind me of like, it was almost affirming. Like I wasn't looking outward because I'm not a fan of with all the work I've done and what I'm teaching, like I'm not a fan of looking outward for people to tell me how to be. It was like, oh, it totally makes sense. Like it just helped me understand myself. And so one of the things is like with this energy type, following joy. And the minute that I'm not following that spark of creative energy and I'm trying to rail myself and put myself into a system to be consistent, let's say, or like I'm way out of alignment with actually my truest self. So when you say how many of us, like, I don't know, like when it comes to hard science, says the master's in science education former teacher lady, that there's like the percentage of people, like there's probably way more people who are not talking about it, who are operating in the world because we think we need to,
because they're trapped,
than actually following the joy and what allows us to feel like lit up. That's the thing. You pay attention to what lights your body up, and if it's a hell yes or a yes, like we go, and if it's an or a no, we don't do it.
But that's why it's important. I feel like that we're talking about because we were those people in the box, right? Yeah. And it took some traumatic, crazy experience to go, oh, it's broken now. Let's see if there's another way. And it helped us see that. And so like my big question, if we're talking about big questions, is can you get people to realize or see that without some crazy big experience? And that's where I'm at I don't know, there was this behavior in grad school. I forgot if I told you, I got my master's in biomechanics and ex-phys. And so we had this whole behavior change section where how to get people to change their behaviors. And the data was extremely clear that nobody wants to change their behaviors. They like the safe and comfort space.
Because that's our brains, right? It makes sense.
Yeah, and it makes sense. So unless there was some crazy thing that happened or where the energy to change was bigger than the reason not to change, nobody was going to change. And so when I was doing part of my GA positionship was to train people, morbidly obese people with mental health issues, and to help them, get on the path. And what we found over and over and over again was these people were either told they were going to die if they didn't get it. So that's a big change, right? And they worked their butts off, or they had a wedding coming up, or they said they couldn't walk their kid down the aisle or something like that. So they all had this big reason, and those people changed and stuck to the program and, did these things and saw the results versus the people who just came in and goes, I want to look good naked. Those people didn't last very long. And so I guess that's the question. I don't know if you run into that with athletes or anything too, or outside of the athletic spectrum is, do you see people grabbing onto these lessons that you're teaching without having, some traumatic experience going on?
Yeah, I think when we connect, because I think you nailed it with connecting with why. Like when we get to the deeper why, not just the why on the surface, but the actual why, and we help people walk through, like, what is it? What do they want? And actually pausing to ask, because I don't know that we spend enough time doing that. Like, what do you really want? in planting those seeds and then helping them through questioning and in the guided process of why do you want what you want, right? And when we're clear on that, I think that pulls us. And I hear you on, so this conversation's come up a lot in the last couple of days as I've been fielding strategy calls and like with campus visits and just like how to structure things. And like what I've noticed, good, bad, I don't know what I'm going to label it, just is that when in a conversation, you can say, come if you want, you're going to have early adopters come and those that are pushed for pain. And then those that probably need it, maybe most, are not going to come.
Right.
When you require and you have a coach that's saying let's come to this conversation or come to this table, the transformation I've seen on the back end has been profound. Like it's anecdotal. It's my experience, not capturing data in any way other than my witnessing and then hearing from coaches, hearing from the athletes themselves. Would they have come in if the coach didn't say, you need to be here, we're doing this as a team? Probably not. And have they been impacted to sit with what is it that they want and why? What is it that they're, like, a really profound conversation with an athlete who was starting to interject resistance into the group. And I welcome that. Like, I want that because that's what they're thinking and feeling. And I can so relate to that because I probably thought like so many of those thoughts, right, when it comes to this work. And it's just like this beautiful opening on their own time too. That's the other thing. It's like, so I believe that I hear you with the brain and the tendencies. I also think that when we teach people about the anatomy of the brain and neuroscience, we equip people with a knowledge of like, oh, my brain isn't going to like change and it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to fight me on this. So we have this meta awareness of like, this is what's happening and why our brain is doing what we're doing. That's probably the most powerful work, I would say, inside the academy where I support athletes and coaches, honestly, is the anatomy and physiology, like the basics of the brain and what's happening around worry and mental time travel and like, you're normal, like you're human, and this is what happens. Like, this is what's happening. And so then there's like, oh, all right. So if we can equip humans with this knowledge of like what's happening in our, like this basics of what's happening in our human bodies because we're human, not because there's something wrong with us. And then we go, okay, so yeah, it's way more comfortable to stay in these patterns. And also like, then you get down a path of beliefs. Like we're going to double down on what we believe because it's painful to challenge what we believe,
Yeah.
And supporting that process. So I can't cite data to say like, yes, we can do it this way. I feel like I know from experience that there's a pathway and that the why, like you mentioned and highlighted in your research, that when we get clear on our why, the deep, deep layers, that could be such a powerful motivator and as a starting point. And then we've got to help people understand those pulls to revert back and building new neural pathways and just helping equip them with the practices that are going to set them up for success to make the change.
Yeah. How uncomfortable is it when you had that athlete pushing back on you? Like, were you in it? Because I bet that probably hasn't happened very often. So
no, and it was such a powerful sign. So I actually, this is true. Like I'm not saying like I was almost like elated because I can, so weird or not weird, I can feel energy. I feel energy in a room. And so I could feel that it was present, this resistance and kind of like body language wise, always respectful, and it was like a door open. So there was this, for me, it was a massive sign that I'd created a container that was safe enough for them to share.
Oh,
and
that
was
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
It was really cool. So for me, and I, affirmed that in the group setting and then privately just said, I really, like, I truly appreciate it. I'm not just saying that. I really appreciate this. This is how we generate, because what you're thinking is being thought by others. So we're bringing it into the space to rumble, which that takes that takes courage. It takes courage to even consider what I have to say when your belief that you're holding is like, ultimately, and the belief was like, this is too soft. Like, this is cupcake. I was like, after I'm like, I said to my husband, I'm like, cupcake? Help me out. Like, what's cupcake? I knew the context, but he's like, oh yeah, cupcakes. And what do you say? Like cookies and candy or something. And I'm like, all right, are you familiar with that language?
Yeah, kind of like frosting and soft.
Yeah. So totally, the concept being soft and bullshit. Like, this is just a bunch of bullshit. This isn't going to help us get better.
Yeah.
And that, when there are public figures out there with millions of followers that some of these athletes have shared that they follow. And I'm like, yeah, like, no wonder you think this is, because they're spewing shame and
hustle culture, right?
It's like so toxic and damaging. And you're just like, yeah, of course, if you're believing that, and now I'm telling you this, they're telling you that this is bullshit and this is soft and weak and going to mess you up. Right.
Yeah.
And so now we have an opening to talk about actually what the science is telling us, like what we know to be true about human behavior and how we can grow and perform. So, yeah. So
isn't that tough though, when you can get results both ways, but one feels better. Right. And
I would argue though with that, like, you can get results, but at what cost?
No,
and also like how high are, like, how could you go further?
Yeah. Well, I've thought of it like this, because I was very much, this is literally written in one of my journals. If a coach said I would jump higher if I ate cardboard for a year, I would eat cardboard for a year. Like, I was willing to just give anything. Like, my body broke because I just pushed it too hard, And we have these hustle culture guys going, do more. If you like, I just watched this, I won't say the name, but he said he went to run his first ultra marathon, which is like 100 miles, and at this race, and at mile 60, his feet were bleeding and he passed out, and he sat there for 30 minutes and was like, I'm not a bitch. I'm just going to get up and do it again. Right. And I'm like, your feet are bleeding. And then he literally said he was peeing blood. And I'm going, shouldn't that be a sign to maybe stop? Right. Yeah. But then at the end, he's like, then I finished my 100 and I felt great. And you go, well, it got you the 100 miles. But if you had,
what else? That's what I want to know. Like, what does that mean about you?
And that's my question too, is, like, he definitely got the results by pushing that. And I think a lot of young people, especially young people, go, if I push hard enough, it'll work. And I'm a firm example of that. I pushed really hard and I got to work. But as you said, at what cost?
What could you have done if you had supported yourself?
Exactly.
Because here's where, if you hang with me for a minute, like, we go right into your story and we say, that part of you that had that, like, it was like flipping forward, backwards, rolling sideways, doing all the things, like, that was seeing what was possible, is so pure. And so that part of you that was driven and hungry, that doesn't go away, right? So if we had supported, like, if you have had the supports around you to meet yourself when you fell with kindness and curiosity and nourish your body, like, holy, who knows what could have happened.
Yeah, if I had a coach, instead of cardboard, try the vegetables.
But we, like, sell this story around, and we get, like, really, like, I think that we think collectively that that he's better than the rest of us. Like, right, we come back to Two Fists, like, that, like, he's here, right? He's better, like, because he did this thing, like, he's better. No, he's here just like everybody else. So he did this thing. Okay, what does it mean? Doesn't change who he is.
Right.
But I think we, like, as a culture, think, and I can say when I was sick, right, and really navigating a dark space, like, I thought I was better than other people because I did certain things. So guess what happened when I fell short? I was in the dumps of shame. Like,
it was the same way.
Yeah. So I have, that's like my, you hit a button in me, because that is something I feel like we don't talk about enough. We finish the story short around these examples of people, like Michael Phelps was a teammate, like, all that he accomplished and what he endured and all of the hard that he was navigating under the surface. Like, people will say, oh, like, like, that's, like, look how good he was. And I say, that guy, I was around when he had his lactate testing, seen his feet, how big they are. Like, his work ethic was, you can't even, so we can't say for sure, but, like, what if that inner language and inner narrator was actually kind and supportive? Like, holy, we have no idea. We just think because the achievement was great, that there couldn't have been something greater. And I just challenged that. Like, maybe not. Yeah.
Oh,
but like,
that's a really good way of saying that.
Like, at what cost? Because that guy reaches the end. We go back to that example. Like, what does it mean? Like, what is he making it mean? That's where I would want to like go in and like, what are you making it mean about you as a human being? Like, you're already worthy. You're already loved. So like, if you operate from this place, like, sure, there are going to be people that don't do sports and quit things and move, like, don't do the job that they have because they're like, I'm only doing it to hustle and prove. It's not actually. But then what's the fallout? We have people that are actually living lives that are authentic to them and meaningful. And whoa, like, I think the world might be a little bit different.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, and that's what I ran into, where you go, when I do operate from those flow states, it's like no matter how much energy I put out, I have more energy to eat.
Yeah.
It's like an unlimited source of energy. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
But when I operate from that other place, it depletes pretty quick. And then you go, oh, I didn't do A, B, or I did A, B, and C, but I didn't do D, E, and F. And now I feel like a piece of garbage because I didn't finish the second half. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm happy we got into flow states almost by accident, because I was like, that's where I'm trying to operate more from. Yeah. And maybe you've been here. We talked about this a little bit, but it seems like a lot of those software programs or thoughts, or I've heard someone say it's like if you don't challenge it, it's like having a cassette tape. If I'm aging myself now, in your car, and every time you go in, it plays the same song over and over again.
Sean, we have a car. It's paid for.
Yeah.
And we just will not let it go because I'm like, oh, really? Do we need one right now in this market? It works beautifully. We just got new tires. It has a cassette tape. And my girls are like, what is this thing?
What's that little rectangle?
What is this? I've got some mixtapes we can play. Oh, anyways, that's awesome. Yes, I'm sorry. So I just went to my mind went to that space. So you're saying the tape's playing. So you were talking about playing in the background.
Yeah, no, I just heard someone explain the program, or I've always described like your neural pathways as like grooves in snow. You know, the more you go over the groove, the deeper it gets, and the easier it is to fall back into it. And then a big traumatic experience is like having a beam fall in your snow, and it creates a big deep groove right away. And it only has happened once, but it's hard to get out of, right? And so having the awareness that you're in a groove allows you to start on a different place in the hill, or let the groove kind of fill back in. It's not going to say it's going to be gone completely, because there's just going to be snow on top. But what I was told at a young age was that you have depression and anxiety, and it's part of your life, and you're going to be stuck with it the rest of your life. And doing these podcasts in the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, I've been able to challenge that and go, oh, we have neuroplasticity, and you can change these things. And maybe it's not just a crazy chemical imbalance that everyone's told me since I was a kid. And I've come to believe that it's not at all for me a chemical imbalance.
Do you see the latest literature about that?
Yeah, it's insane, isn't it? And so like being on antidepressants for since I was 10 years old, and then being completely off of them against doctor's orders, and feeling better than I ever have now, just by challenging thoughts. And I know I'm not recommending that to anybody. Don't ignore your doctors. But I'm saying, for it not working for 15, 20 years for me, going, why am I still doing this? Yeah. And I forgot if I told you this in the last podcast, like the idea with these podcasts originally was to see what depression actually looked like in my brain, and then do what people like you would recommend, and then see if I could change it. So the first gentleman I talked to, he was like, I told him this. I was like, I'm going to get an MRI. I'm going to do a CAT scan. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to see what depression looks like. I'm going to do blood tests, see what it looks like wherever I can find it. Yeah. And then I'm going to have a measurement, because I'm a data dork, right? And then I'm going to do all these things for 6 months, take those tests again, and then see how it changed. Yeah. And he just and I thought about this for 2 years. So I'm like, I got my plan. I'm ready to go. Just like I wrote a training plan, like, here we go. And he goes, you're not going to find anything. And this was like 10 minutes into the conversation. And I'm like, what? And he goes, depression's just a collective of symptoms. It's not anything in you. And and I probably heard that a few times in the past, but never so like clearly. And then it made me go, well, what's causing the symptoms? And that question tweaked everything. where I go, oh, I've been trying to solve all these symptoms my entire life instead of trying to find what's causing them. And then the root. And when I started finding those and navigating those, then life started becoming awesome again. Because I wasn't afraid of depression anymore. It was like, then I was welcoming it in a way like, oh, why am I feeling this? Instead of going, I need to take this, or numb this, or watch or edit or work or do something to make it go away. Then I started going, I need to lean into this and see where it's coming from. And then it gave me my answers.
Our bodies talk to us.
Yeah, they do. But that's that awareness piece and knowing where to look at the same time.
So. Totally. I love your snow piece there, because that, so profound. And I think like the beam can also happen. What I've been learning about trauma is like that can happen. Those grooves, like the one, or even the ski tracks, like get worn over time. And so like repeated things, it might not be one big thing that happens. And also trauma patterns can also be laid by like reoccurring small things, right, over time. Yeah. And this idea of root, that is like another place I feel like I'm a disruptor in the world, because I'm like that collective message to put a Band-Aid on it, to just like have that quick fix. We're so, of course, we look at our brains like that feels like we want that, right? We want the quick fix. And change is hard, and also turning inward and sitting with emotions and sitting with our physical body and healing is hard.
Yeah.
And I would argue that like living and trying to like just slap one thing, and I'm not anti-medicine. I take medicine. I have asthma and I take my medicine every day because it helps me breathe. Like it is something that I need to do so that I feel whole and balanced and allow, right. And I can live my best life. And so there's just the urge and impulse of what you're talking about to just like reach for something and not look at the root cause. It's like that. It's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like now I'm like similar to you with depression. My journey is deeply personal. I'm totally okay sharing it, and you can edit what you want. But I broke up with my therapist because she was pushing medicine. And I knew, like internally knew, like I just knew that there, like I was in this stirring in this space of like needing change, needing something. Like there was the other things going on in my life that I needed to heal, and it was completely connected to trauma, like my childhood stuff, and that idea of like being able to sit with it. I needed people in my life that were going to be able to sit with me in that space and help me move that through. So that's kind of a pivot that I took in the last 3 years away from talk therapy, which served me tremendously and was so helpful, into more somatic experiencing, energy work, coming into my body, because that was where like I could talk and talk and talk, and my body was talking to me, and it was like I wasn't able to move the trauma through just by talking. And so for me, I could feel my body. I knew what it was. It wanted me to go in this direction. And so I knew that this other direction that she was wanting to go without getting to the root, right? Because things were starting to make more sense to me, and I was learning more about what was happening in my body. And so, I was like, okay, we've got to go. And she served me in so many ways, and I'm so grateful. And also that was a really hard thing to do, because when you're being told by someone who holds power and authority and has letters after their name in this way and has helped me in other ways, it was like, I'm going to say no to you. And then the mind's going, right? So, and I'm going to say yes to honoring what my body is needing. And wasn't that I was going to do it alone or go it alone and try to wrestle through this thing. It was like, I need to find other supports to help me heal. That was massive for me. And it was like literally that, and the kind of taking the leap and honoring what my body was saying versus doing what somebody in this position of power and authority. And not that, like, I mean, I hired her, but like still, we look at things, like we look at doctors as holding power over us. That this maybe wasn't, just because she was saying it wasn't necessarily. So that idea when you were talking about like questioning, is it working for me? And am I willing to go step into this space or without trying this first? So it was, and I feel like I took a quantum leap, truly, because I was able, like, so much of those pathways are not just in our brain, like our bodies hold on to that too. So being able to release that is so helpful. So that's another part of work with athletes, is like the breath work piece, and then the movement, like helping regulation isn't just about thinking and challenging thoughts. It's a part of it. It's also get back in this body of ours that we spend so much time demanding so many things from, yet we're like not nurturing it.
Yeah.
We're not home in it, right? And so coming back home into the body and honoring it as a vessel was so powerful for me. So so thank you for sharing that, because that's another place I feel like
I'm so
not a lot of people are talking about.
I wrestle. Oh man, I've had too many experiences like that where you go, I don't think you're helping me. And, and then I would leave, but then I would feel this massive guilt, because then there's that other traumatic piece of my childhood going, you're not trying hard enough. You're not sitting there long enough. You just didn't put in the work. But there was a deeper thing that I didn't realize it until now that I was listening to, where you go, I just knew this wasn't the way. And then after talking to that guy, it was like, he's not a therapist. He's just someone I'm talking to who gave me the facts that they're just a lot of these people in the past were just trying to help with symptoms. And I think like that, and I don't know if I shared this in the last one either. I know I have in another podcast, but the best I ever felt was when I had one of those, I used to call them like knots, kind of untangle in your brain. And then it would all come out of your body. Like I was just bawling my eyes out in a therapy session when I was in the mental health hospital. And I remember a couple days later going, oh my God, that's what I was hoping meds would do. Like that's what I've been looking for, is that. And so that was the very first time where I went, I don't think meds are ever going to help me.
The best description, like it's visual, comes from, and did I ever connect you with Eric Goosen at Same Here?
Okay. Oh wait, maybe.
Or connected to the Alliance. So part of the Alliance, I was fortunate to, now that we were back out traveling, do some work with him, and have had like just the platform and the practitioners that are in the Alliance, the people that he's pulled together, and just the whole concept, like it's like 5 and 5. So it resonates deeply with my message of like, we are all humans and all of us have mental health, right? So we presented at a university in Connecticut together, and it was the first time I saw him share his slides, right, and story. And he has a slide where he talks about trauma. So coming from this space of like, as humans, we all have stuff. All of us have baggage. I don't know that a human can be born and escape life without trauma. Right? So he has a visual. And so the blue, it's like this container, a silhouette of a brain. And it's like filling with blue coloring. And it's like your healthy brain. And then there's red bits of trauma that start to seep in. So you have this red color. It's kind of coming up the back of accumulated trauma over time or traumatic events. And you see it. And it's just like kind of taking over the brain, the colors, right? So the red comes in. And so he then has like this like slip, this looks like a piece of tissue paper that comes in, and it's green, and it's just like a very thin veil separating the trauma from the brain. This is not the neuroscience.
Right,
it's totally like a picture to capture, what's happening and how that represents medication. And so this idea that it can be helpful and kind of allowing and buying time and allowing access to the parts of our brain that we can't necessarily access, kind of a buoying, right? To help us. But that doesn't heal those pathways. It doesn't help the body move the trauma through. So we've got to do the work too. And I think a lot of people, I think we probably could do a series like a podcast series on just the healthcare system. And
I know that was actually one of my questions but we're running out of time, so I won't ask it. But I've described the similar thing. It's like if you got knee surgery, like if you don't do the rehab, your knee's going to be wonked out for life. Right? But if you take morphine, it's going to feel better, but you can't take morphine forever or else your knee's still going to be wonky.
Yeah.
And that's how I've looked at meds. Yeah. So I'm not anti-meds by any stretch, but they they haven't assisted me. And 15 years of trying, made it very clear of that. But so that's I'm always very careful to not tell people not to get on them. But if you do, I firmly believe now that you have to be looking for what's caused the thing in the first place.
Totally. Yeah.
So can we end on talking about your course and like what's in there and what you do and what you're trying to do with it?
Yeah. Yes. There's so much. So
sorry, I didn't give me more time.
No.
Take all the time you want.
This is this is where I get really lit up. So when I started, so like that 2016, I talked about kind of that like real big pivot into the sport. My first kind of steps in were sharing my story openly, and actually returning home to USA Swimming was one of the earlier stops and saying, like, even in front of the coaches, like, hey, like this was actually happening, like. Right, when we talk about mental health, we're talking about human beings and kind of going in and sharing more from an advocacy and storytelling standpoint. And then what I discovered is, number one, like a lot of people are hurting, and it's not people that are, I think along the way, like that, my definition of mental health has really evolved because, like many, I saw it as like mental health and mental illness as being like exchangeable, and they're not, right? Yeah. And that humans, and especially coaches, are hurting, and there's a lot on their plate that they're not equipped to handle. And the athletes, like, it was this kind of like, this generation can't handle things. And then you're seeing like coaches that you're like, okay, some of the things you're doing are contributing to pain and suffering, and yet you care. So it was kind of this like the beginning stages were just taking in information and going like, what is happening? And I think one of my gifts is like seeing things like structurally, like seeing problems and solutions, kind of like almost design, like in my mind of like collecting and hearing on the ground what was happening. And so I knew that sharing my story and storytelling is powerful because it's vulnerable, and you go first and people cannot, like, you're with them, right? They're listening and engaged. And then the teacher in me, that's like my childhood. So like, that's like who I feel like my like purpose on this earth. And that it was like, okay, I've identified skills, but nowhere to send you to do this work. Like, I don't know, like it doesn't exist. This pillar, you find pockets of it here and pockets of it there. And it felt like mental performance and high performing skills are like here with a flair of a little bit of shame. And then over here, you've got mental health talking about mental illness, like not talking about mental health of all people. So it felt like, again, this middle, like what does the middle look like? And how do we, as I was like digging into the literature, like how do I now that I've identified these skill sets, and I'll share them with you. So number one is mindfulness, which we both talk about and practice and integrate. And then number two is emotional agility, which, right, is a component of mindfulness. And then self-compassion, which again, they're all interconnected. So they're not necessarily even separate things and skills, although the researchers and the body of work behind them are just, so they're all evidence-based practices, and mindfulness is evidence-based. The others are evidence-supported. And so for me, it's like, if we can start to integrate these skills. So the biggest, greatest work at the beginning was like, okay, coaches, athletes, parents, people, like any skill you're trying to learn, there's three things you can train in those three buckets, right? The physical, the technical, and then the mental. And we, and again, the disruptors like coming at that militaristic style, that's like really the only place that's a practice that exists. So like, we want to train the mind, we're going to go beat the body up to try to train the mind. And it's like, we know way too much to be operating in that way right now. And actually, indeed, the military is using mindfulness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're going to like that.
So, yeah. So it's like, no, that's what we think the military is doing, but it's actually not even right what the skills and practices. So creating this pillar and providing this pillar was essential for me. So if I'm going to come in to provide a keynote, then I did not want to just drop in and then say bye. I did not want it to be this one-time thing where we plant seeds and it's like, see you later. I wanted to provide a place of practice. And so it began as supporting individual teams and athletic departments. I have opened it to the general public and still welcoming in teams and athletic departments. But essentially the concept is coming in and having, a kickoff and engaging in those exercises, right? Like this conversation and exercises, leading first with story, and then being able to work within. So a beautiful example of this is an athletic department in Idaho. And I went out and had this conversation. And so I don't just talk to the students, but also conversation with the coaches, welcoming in resistance. Like, because one of the hardest things is when you're providing a pillar of this mental pillar of support is that coaches, first of all, time, they're strapped. They do so much. They do so much.
So I don't coach in college.
Time. And then like, who are you and what are you gonna, like, what's gonna happen here? Like, what are you gonna open up that we can't shove back in a box, right? Like there's this fear around, it's trust, right? Mm-hmm. And so being able to engage and let them know and be able to support that, to tell them like we can creatively, engage in this academy space, which is a virtual platform that's pretty massive, that is filled with modules, helping someone from that first level of awareness of like, why do we even want to have a mental pillar of support, to what is our inner world and like, why does it help us to know about it, to then getting into the meat of it, which I feel like is where I do my best work, which is like where we get stuck, teaching about the human brain and the anatomy and physiology. So the modules, so there's videos in there, and then there's PDFs. And it's guided, right? So there's 6 kind of blocks of work in all throughout infused or resources around honoring mental well-being, right? So it's not like this thing over here for mental illness for these people. And it's not over here where we're only talking about visualization and performance. Yeah. We're talking about the whole human and integrating our true selves so that we can tap into that high level. So it's connecting it all, so that we're aligned. And then there's another section inside the home of the academy. So the academy has like the modules and the lessons that are themed. And then the next section is the mental muscle gym, which is like over 50, over 50 sport-centric mindfulness exercises. And I say to them, like, you can utilize these. They're great. And also we just want to have a place of practice, and having it all be in one space is helpful. So how I guide them through, it depends on what they're looking to do. So in this one school in Idaho, it was like the central hub and connection point was the trainer. So you have to like trainer because that's the place where they're like, they see all of it, right? Yeah. And we did an exercise and activity. So they have like a wall where they put up resources and supports, and then they took the same here cards that we did as an engaging activity in the keynote and put them up on the wall. And they have a calming corner now to help with regulation. It's just beautiful. And then the athletes can roll in. So I wouldn't suggest, so if I come in and let's say we're in the middle of cross country season, right? If it's fall, it's like, I don't know that would be the best time. They can play around and see like other videos that they want to do, but being able to on board and come in and start to work through at a time that aligns with where they are in their season is also helpful. And I guide them with workout cards, making maybe overly like tapping into the analogy of like the parallel of my husband's a strength coach. And I was like, hey, give me your workout card template. And so I made this, I love them, the templates, they're workout cards for each workout block to train our mind. And then there's the daily like reps they've got to get in with their mental muscle gym exercises and the video modules. And then there are priming questions like connecting with their why, deposits they've made. So it's a place, it represents a place of practice for those who are wanting to learn more. So they sit in this opening, or they're in that place where like they're navigating a little bit of like frustration from not, I mean, I think every athlete can relate to not being able to tap into a high level performance when they know they've done the work. Yeah. Or they know they're in their head, or they know they're pulled by comparison. Like, I feel that a lot, I mean, most athletes are aware of where they're struggling. And so to be able to provide a place where they can go in and literally, like, one by one, I have athletes that do that with their binders and they engage in that way, or others who go in and go like a la carte and go for the ones that resonate with them the most. So yeah, I feel like, and then to weave in the work of Rebecca McConville, who's a registered dietitian, that like took it to another level, because what I have learned recently, really, the connection, which seems wild, and it just is, like, between our mental health and food and sleep. Yeah. And so we know those things. She goes deeper with why. And like, we don't have enough energy to make neurotransmitters. We don't feel good. And you're like, no kidding. But like, I never thought of that. Right. Yeah. And so walking athletes through the foundations of nutrition, away from diet culture, away from all the noise. We walk and step around like the shoulds of how you're supposed to do things, and and her specialty is in eating disorder recovery. So we've done a lot of work outside of this. So yeah, so that having that layer woven throughout is also really powerful. So I've had coaches who come in and they then will like show it to the team, right? So especially high school programs, it's like, let's sit down and watch this 10-minute video and then let's talk about it.
That's
so it gives them the right. So now they've also previewed it. They know what's coming, and there's a worksheet they can hand out. So it's guided for them. So it's like, here's what we can do in this time together. So they're onboarding that third pillar without having to become an expert in that area. So yeah,
I'm even more pumped to hear that coaches are getting on board.
Yeah.
Because
yes,
I mean, that's where I don't want to say it's where it starts, but they influence the next generation so much more than a lot of people do. So I'm just jazzed that they're doing that. Have you gotten a lot of good feedback from it so far too? And it's been out almost.
Yeah, so I've had with teams, it's been almost 3 years of having this in existence, and the feedback is powerful. And then you can see, and what's cool is to sit in conversations with coaches to tell you the changes they're seeing on the ground. Like, that's cool. When it comes to, the invitation for people to join, I'll like total transparency. And also, I know, like, for those that don't know, your video making skills are just right. So tap into you, like, how do I market this? How do I share this and message? I know what to say. It's a matter of like being able to communicate it in a way that people are like open to receiving it. So
like a kindergarten.
Slow. Like it's been slow on that front of the opening the doors in part. And I'm totally okay with it, because it's going to take time for people to realize like that, like this is like something people they don't even know they necessarily need. So it's like, where does this fit in my life? How am I going to have the time for this? So slowly through conversations with parents who are reaching out for the mentorship program, let's say, like, we talk about like, is this the pathway or is it more one-on-one? So it's, I'm grateful that it's a tool so that I don't have to go somewhere and then say, I can't help you, like, with skill building.
I'm grateful it exists. Like, that's, I wish it was around when I was younger, or I'm just happy it is now, to be honest with you. Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
And then I'll let you go, I promise. Do you get a lot of parents taking that course too, or what do you run into that?
I've thought about that. I haven't marketed it to parents.
Okay. I was just curious.
I think a parent one is necessary. And I'm in a parent. I'm like, do parents take courses? I'm in one right now. I'm taking a course on parenting. Maybe a shortened version of it or something along those lines. I don't know. Want to collab on something like for parents?
I'd be something, because I get that a lot. Like when I went to the pole vault summit last year and I gave my first huge talk. And it's terrifying. And I talked to you about that last time. And then,
nerve sighted.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. Like, I just heard someone say like, there's a fine line between anxiety and excitement, and you gotta.
Well, physiologically, look into that and like to go like nerd out a little bit. When you look at how you sit, like what you say, how you frame it, it impacts the ratio of cortisol and DHEA.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it?
So cool.
But I had so many parents come up to me after that, and the fear at the time was coming from it felt like I was telling a bunch of parents stuff they didn't want to know.
Yeah.
Like you go, this might not be healthy for your child, or this might not be good. And I know all you want is what's best for them, but the way you're going about it. And that was where my fear was coming from, not standing in front of a bunch of people just telling stuff that I've learned over the years or my story. It was going, this is going to sting. You know? And then but as we've talked.
And their emotions are theirs to process.
Because there was a lot of resistance from some right away. And then you could see it kind of dissipate. And the best comment I think I've ever gotten from somebody was the next day. So how the summit works is day one, they have like the elite competition and they show off all the professional athletes and Olympians and stuff. And they have this big meet in front of like 4,000 people. And then right before that, there's a bunch of clinics and talks where the kids can go learn from the elite athletes and these coaches, and then parents and coaches can go to these workshops. And I was just in charge of one of the workshops. And after the workshop, the next day, the kids jump on the same runways that the elite athletes are jumping on.
Oh, so fun.
And then at every pit, there's like an Olympian helping, put up the crossbar or something so that they get to high five Sandy Morris or these Olympic gold medalists or whatever. And one of the dads the next day sent me a message and goes, after your talk, I was a much nicer, kinder, and gentler parent to my kid. And that like made it all worth it. Like all the fear, anxiety, anything that happened. And I got a few messages similar to that, but that was the one that I'll never forget, because you go, this does need to be said, And as you said throughout this entire podcast and what you're doing with your course, it's bringing this awareness of what is helpful versus what we were taught as kids from our coaches. So
yes. Oh my gosh. That's really beautiful. And you just changed that kid's life. Because like the parent wants to do well. Like the parent loves their kid. Like, I mean, I know you're in this space. You are with me now. Yeah. Parenthood is like a trip. And that, like, again, so comes like full circle back to the beginning of like the two hands and being separate, being able to help parents with that. I am totally down for collaboration with you on this.
Yeah, we should talk for sure. But can you let everyone know where to go if they want to get that course, or how to get a hold of you and things like that?
I mean, it's got to go on it's not on my, so it's SamanthaLivingstone.com/empower. That's where the course is. And then Samantha Livingstone and on socials as well. Yeah. I got to get a little banner at the top of my homepage to let people know.
We'll get it. We'll get it rolling. Yeah. I can't thank you enough for having another conversation with you.
Oh my gosh.
It was super fun.
And totally like the flow we talk about, like just the things that energize us. So I will leave more energized than I sat down on the chair.
I know, this 90 minutes just flew by. I looked at the clock. I was like, oh my God, don't want
time to wrap.
Your time. Yeah, time for sure.
Time to go to the gym for me. I'm going to live. Yeah. So no, thank you so much for this, and good luck. And let's talk soon for real.
I hope you guys found something in there that was useful. Go follow Samantha Livingstone on all social media channels, and boom, you can check the show description to find links to her things. And if you do the course, let me know what you think. I will probably be signing up myself. It looks amazing. Life's meant to be experienced. Get out there and experience life, and curiosity will get you there. See you in the next one.